Welcome back to Web API Tutorials. I'm Venkat. In the previous video, we have seen what is repository design pattern, and in this video, let's implement that. This is our project. So this is the student controller. So we have implemented the entity framework here. So we have used the entity framework inside this controller. Let us create a repository pattern. For that, inside data folder, let's create a new folder called repository, and inside repository let me add interface. Select interface here, student repository. This one is a student repository interface. Put I before that, and in the file name also let me put I. Now we need to put these two side by side, the repository and the controller. And in the controller, the first method we have implemented is get students async. So getting all the students. So the same method we need to implement in repository. So here you can see we are getting all the students. To get all the students, we need to write a method inside repository. What is the return type? Students, list of students. List of students. Get all. So that's the method. And what's the next method? Get a student by ID. So what is the return type? Single student. Here you can see getting student by ID is returning single student record. Here you can see single student record. So we are implementing the repository pattern. That means whatever we are getting from database, that we need to return from repository. Student so student repository dot get all, student repository dot get. So like that. Let me change it, get by ID, and let me do the same thing, get by name. In case of name, need to change the parameters. Here in our controller, we have get student by ID. After that, we have a get student by name also. That's why I have put another method. After this, create student async. To create the student, we need to have a method. Here you can see we are adding one record to the entity framework and calling the save changes. What is the return type for this? The created student ID. Integer is the create and student is the input. And similarly, update. For update also, let us do the same thing. And for delete, we will return the boolean value, boolean or bool. I think in C# it is bool, and we need just ID, integer ID. ID is enough to delete a record. So we have implemented all the database level methods in iStudent repository. We have added one interface and added all the methods. We need to implement all these methods. So to implement all these methods, we need to add a class with name student repository. So this is the student repository class which needs to inherit from iStudent repository. Here it is saying the methods in iStudent repository are not implemented. So we can take the help from the Visual Studio implement interface. It will add all the methods but without any implementation inside. Okay, let's implement this. What is the first method? First method is this, get all. To get all, what we need? We first need to add the DB context here. For that we need to add the constructor, and inside that constructor we need to inject the DB context. Let's go to the student controller. Where is the controller? Student controller. So this is the DB context. We don't need this DB context here, so we are moving it to the student repository, and we need to get this one, college DB context. Remove that and add inside the repository constructor and cut that and paste it here. So we have moved the DB context from student controller to repository layer. So now student controller is a low level component. That's why we have moved the DB components out of it. Now let's implement. We have a DB context now. Let us implement it. Underscore DB context dot students dot to list async. That's it. Because this one is a asynchronous method, that's why we are seeing the error. Let's make it asynchronous. Put a return statement, await, and now let's convert method to the asynchronous. So as we have made it asynchronous, we need to do the changes in interface also. Okay, Visual Studio already modified the interface. That's great. Okay. Okay, now get all students is done. Next one is get by ID. We have ID, and let's copy the statement from student controller. So this is the statement. We are just querying the DB context. DB context dot students dot where student dot ID equal to ID. Here we can give the meaningful names. Student dot ID equal to ID, then get first or default async. So here we are getting the error because we need to return some value and also we need to make it asynchronous. We just need to return the student. Return. Okay, let's make it asynchronous. Make method asynchronous. So we also need to modify it in interface. Visual Studio made that for us. Thank you. The same thing we need to do it inside the get by name. So instead of ID, we need to dot equals name, but here we need to do tool over to make it case insensitive dot tool over. Okay, we need to make the method async. Yes, let's verify the interface also modified. Yes, and after getting it we need to create it. Yeah, so we got the student record here, and here we need to create it. So to create underscore db context dot students dot add it. So after adding underscore db context dot save changes. That's it. After saving the changes, return the ID. Return student dot ID. Creation is done. Let's use the asynchronous methods. Async. Here we need to put await. Once we made it async, we need to make the method also async. Okay, let's verify. Interface also modified. Yeah, interface also modified. Creation is done. And update. For update, first we need to get the student by ID. No returning. So after we get where student, that's the student to update. And once the student is there, okay, student to update. That's the student record to update. If student is not equal to null, if the student to update is not equal to null, then we need to update it. All these statements we need to do. Student to update dot name. What happened? Here student dot id, right? Student dot id. Yes. Student name equal to this student dot name. Yes. Student to update dot email equal to this one. Student to update dot address equal to, sorry, this one is student. So here date of birth. So we have copied all the data, and once copying is done, we need to save the changes. Underscore db context dot save changes. Save changes async. We need to await this. So once saving is done, let's return the student ID. Return student.id. So if the student equal to null, here let's put it outside. So if the student equal to null, let's throw an error. Throw new exception, argument null exception. No student found. with ID, student.id. Need to put dollar here. If the student not found, we are throwing argument null exception. So if the student found, then we are updating it. Okay, as we are using the asynchronous methods, let's make the method as async. Let us cross check the interface also updated. Yes. Let's make the delete method asynchronous. If we need to delete a record, first we need to find a record where student to delete. So that's the student to delete. And if student to delete is null, we need to return this error. If the student to delete is equal to null, no student found with ID, this ID. Then if we found the student, okay, so once the student record is fetched, we need to remove that. db context dot students dot remove. Yes. After removing, we need to save changes. So for this save changes, we can use asynchronous method. Need to await. So we need to make the delete method as asynchronous. So this one is asynchronous now, and we need to return the boolean value. So after this, return true. Okay, so we have implemented the repository design pattern for student. What is this error? Does not implement the interface iStudent repository get all async, because it does not have matching return type of list of a student. Okay. So here we need to make all these as a task return type. Visual Studio made it partial update. And we need to close it as well. Yeah, that's right. And error is gone. So we have created the repository design pattern, and we need to start using that repository in this student controller. Let's do that in next video. For more videos like this, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions, please ask in comment box. Thank you for watching.